Welcome to Tomversations, a monthly conversation about enterprise IT technology with me, your host, Tom Hollingsworth, the networking nerd. This month, I'd like to tackle a topic that I've actually talked about in the past. If you remember all the way back to episode 3 last May, we talked about network automation. And specifically, I talked about how network automation is a people problem. And if you want to check out that episode, make sure you look up here for the iCard that just flashed up on screen. But I want to take it from a different perspective now because we're a little over a year past that episode, and a lot of things have happened, frankly. And I wanted to look at the way that network automation is being driven now mostly by the cloud. So let's have a conversation about that. We've made a lot of progress in network automation. When you look back on all the ways that we've started integrating it into our professional lives, I think the easiest way to think about how network automation has changed what we do is the fact that it kind of looks invisible now. My kids were watching a movie the other day and they were shocked at the fact that the actors were talking on a phone connected to the side of a building. My 16-year-old said, "Dad, wasn't he just take out his phone and call somebody?" And I'm like, son, this was recorded in the 90s and cell phones were not as ubiquitous as they are now. Today, we wouldn't even think twice about having a cell phone on us. And that's how network automation feels now. It's everywhere. Maybe it's not the full orchestrated magic show that makes everything happen the way that it should, but it is here. The reason why is because the stakeholders in your organization are trying to get rid of the blocking functions that they believe are reducing work efficiency. And I've seen this process being repeated over and over again because the network team isn't the one who's always been at fault. If you want to rewind the clock to the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was the server team and the storage team. Those two people could never get on the same page. I need a server. Well, that's okay. I need some storage space on the SAN. Well, the SAN people are taking their sweet time getting that deployed because they need to rearrange some stuff. And eventually we got past that blocking function. And we did that thanks to companies like VMware, who did a really great job of integrating those two functions together. Today, the idea of the storage and the server teams being basically the same team is not that foreign. I promise you, 20 years ago, it very much was. The network team is still a bit of an outlier, kind of like the security team. We're the departments of no. Our job is to carefully consider all of the options and decide how this could possibly go horribly wrong, and then tell people that we'll get to it until we get another request on our desk of get it done right now because there's somebody with budget who's very mad at you. We need to be integrated into the bigger picture. That's what automation is about. It's about taking the functions of what we're doing and integrating them into a larger narrative, if you will. And I'll tell you why that's important. Because for a long time, as far back as I can remember, I've been told that network automation is going to take jobs. It's going to remove the thing that I do every day, the comfortable idea of me coming in and repeating the same tasks over and over again. And that's what I talked about in the last video, is that you have to solve the people problems first. But a year on from that video, I can honestly say that network automation is not your enemy. Your enemy is the cloud. And why is that? Well, I've talked to several people in the industry, and they're all telling me pretty much the same thing. Despite the rosy picture that you see from companies who fill out surveys and get put into these industry reports, the migration to the cloud is actually a lot slower than you might realize. And you might think to yourself, well, why is that? Because everybody obviously wants to be in the cloud. Yes and no. People definitely do want the advantages that cloud offers. They do not want a subscription model for their compute services because, by and large, as we found out with the decentralization and unplugging of cable, bundling things together actually saves you a lot of money. When I have to pay for every individual service on its own, it actually turns out that I'm spending more money than I want to. And companies, especially ones that made that jump early, really do not like the bills that they're getting from companies like AWS or Microsoft. In fact, that's the reason why folks like Corey Quinn and the Duckbill Group exist, is because they're essentially trying to save you money on your Amazon bill. But companies are willing to pay the price for increased efficiency. Now, if you think back to the whole Department of No discussion, The network team is a blocker because they get in the way. And that's why companies are saying, well, we're just going to use DevOps and we're going to have them provision everything. They're going to go around the departments of no. And sometimes that pays off when you use cloud networking, which is kind of a foreign concept to a lot of us old school networking professionals. Sometimes it doesn't pay off when you go around your security team and you find out that there's a big gaping hole in the things that you're storing. Open S3 buckets, anyone? For companies that are not quite ready to make the jump fully to public hosted cloud, or for companies that are unable to do that, think medical or legal, hybrid cloud's true value is not hosting all of your data at Amazon. It's about taking the operational models that cloud offers and bringing them in-house to streamline efficiency. And honestly, that was really what we saw in the early days of these cloud-like offerings that were being put down in the enterprise. Think OpenStack, if you want to go back that far. OpenStack was essentially a way to open source cloud and bring it in-house. Now, ultimately, OpenStack failed for a variety of other reasons. But the idea of doing operational models in-house that are much more efficient really did pick up traction. VMware pioneered this as well. And the reason why is because they reduced the complexity in their networking equipment. When I first started out studying to be a VMware administrator, I was shocked at what the little amount of features you could find on a regular vSwitch in a VMware host. Even a VMware distributed switch back in the early 2000s was effectively a hub. It could do very little. And when I thought about my networking background, I was very frustrated at all of the things that I was missing. And it took me several years to realize that all of those feature sets that I was missing in my networking equipment on this virtual switch were actually things that I had been programming into networks for years to make them harder to manage and more complex and more difficult to troubleshoot. Now, is that a good thing? Well, it depends on whether or not the application that I need for the device or for the service required those things. But if I couldn't get them in the device, I had to find more creative ways to build it. Now, take that idea and extract it out to the cloud. I can't reliably say that I'm running on a Cisco switch or a Juniper switch or an Arista switch. So I have to create the services that my network can offer to my applications in other ways by reducing that complexity, by offering the ability to provision those services automatically across a variety of devices. I've effectively created an automatable solution. It also helps me reduce mistakes. And I can't underscore this enough. There was a recent Twitter thread that I participated in from my friends over at Juniper Networks, and a blog post that I wrote about it regarding failure as a learning model. If anybody has ever typed in the command to add a VLAN to a trunk and forgotten to add the word add, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a simple mistake to make, and you usually make it once or twice before you always remember that. Automation solves that problem for us. It creates a repeatable process with all of the steps. Think about a teacher who has to leave a lesson plan for a substitute. You want to leave a plan that is going to be followed no matter what, with every possible step that you could think of. That's what automation really does, is it gets all of the junk out of our brains into a place where it can be repeatable over and over again. And more importantly, it challenges us to find the exceptions in the process and to make sure that we've accounted for them. What happens when it's a different kind of switch? What happens when this software needs an additional port? You have to think through those exceptions. Now, the one group of people who this really does impact is our junior administrators. And I would say that it impacts them negatively, but for a good reason. There are a lot of organizations out there that treat a junior network administrator essentially as a shovel pusher. Their job is to go out and dig the hole. I'll tell you where to dig it, but you need the experience of how to dig a hole before you can get to the point where you can tell people where to dig them. The lesson that we're trying to teach people in network administration is which commands to type in and what things need to be included so that when you forget to do it, like removing VTP servers from your switch and causing the network to crater. We're actually trying to teach you to think through the process. And I get that. And there are certain lessons that can only be learned like that. But the best place to learn those lessons is not in a production network, it's in a lab somewhere. So maybe what you do is, instead of giving your junior administrators busy work adding VLANs and configuring routing protocols and making those mistakes, you give them a lab environment and you mentor them a little bit more, so that when they're done making those mistakes in practice, you can show them why we created the automation in the first place to keep them from doing it. Now, a lot of you folks out there are probably still a little antsy about this. I don't want network automation. I'm tired of people taking my jobs. I'm tired of change. Well, change is a constant in our industry. The token ring and ArcNet networks that we all first started working on have been supplanted by IP. Soon IPv4 will become IPv6, and the wireless networks that we worked on are quickly becoming something that, while wireless, is wholly unrecognizable to anybody who worked on the first versions of the technology. Change is hard to manage, but you can manage it, because if you don't, someone else will manage it for you. And if you think that I'm kidding, I want you to go look at the offerings from the latest group of network vendors. Companies like Cisco are creating orchestration platforms that manage all of the changes on the back end for you. Companies like Juniper Networks are building software agents that will take care of that for you automatically. There are companies that are building solutions that will automatically replicate configurations across a variety of switches with simple inputs. But more than that, they're abstracting the need to type those commands in the first place. They're giving you natural language processing that allows you to just declare the state that you want the network to be in, and it's taking care of all of that for you. Now, let me ask you this question as a professional. If that solution appeared in your network tomorrow, would you be comfortable with it? Would you say, I don't like this because I don't trust it? And if your answer is yes, what would it take for your company to find someone who was comfortable with it? Because one of the other things you have to consider is that if you are standing in the way of the implementation of a solution like this, you have become an opportunity cost to the company. And as much as it pains me to say it, there is a dollar amount attached to that. And if the dollar amount attached to your opportunity cost is greater than the opportunity cost of implementing the program with a new engineer who doesn't know any different, well, you may find yourself updating your resume on LinkedIn, because someone out there may need you, but it may not be the company you're working for right now. The real key to network automation is to understand what it's trying to accomplish and get ahead of it. It doesn't mean that you have to learn to be a Python programmer. It doesn't mean that you have to unlearn all of the years of study that you've put in. The fundamentals and the basics of what you know are still very important, because you know as much about how things should work as why they should work. You are invaluable to the process. You're programming these algorithms so that they don't make the same mistakes that you did. But you also need to understand that this change is going to happen. You can be in front of it and make it smooth for your company and be seen as a valuable team player. Or you can create an opportunity cost for your company and be seen as an impediment. Networking has been an impediment for organizations for a number of years. I think it's time for us to embrace this change and get ahead of it before the cloud and network automation rule us as irrelevant. I hope you found this conversation enlightening and informational. We have a variety of topics on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/gestaltit video. We also include a great overview of these posts over at gestaltit.com, including show notes and links to some interesting articles that you're probably going to check out. We will be back next month with another episode of Tomversations, and I hope that you'll join us for that. And in the meantime, take care, and I can't wait to talk to you soon.